and welcome to another interview for An African's Queen podcast. My name is Caron Marguerite, and I am an emotional intelligence coach as well as a management consultant. I'm actively seeking to build my network in Nigeria for Nigerian entrepreneurs. In particular, I'm keen because my family and I want to move from Melbourne, Australia to Nigeria. If you are able to help with this extraordinary change of lifestyle, I invite you to reach out. Most keenly, I want to work with Nigerian businesses based in Nigeria that want to utilize leadership development tools and techniques, in particular emotional intelligence, to ensure that each member of their leadership team excel, create high-performing teams, and see the results not only in employee engagement, but also in your business's bottom line. Today, I have an incredible guest with me. Her name is Dr. Ojiugo Ajunwa. She is a seasoned project launch strategist, an online business coach, and a process improvement expert with over 2 decades of work experience. She's passionate about empowering young female entrepreneurs to feel confident and capable when it comes to digital transformations. Ojugo is the co-founder of Ritetrac Consulting, a management consulting and training company based in Abuja. She is also a fellow at the Employee Benefits Institute and the chairman at the Teach for Employability Foundation, among many other of her incredible accomplishments in her illustrious career. Allow us now to welcome our esteemed guest. How are you this evening? I am so excited to have you with us, all the way from Abuja in Nigeria, Dr. Ojiugo Ajunwa. Have I said your name correctly? Please, please, please.
Yes, you did. You really did.
Perfect. Great, because I'm always very nervous, as I shared before we started recording, about the very difficult, heavy syllable Australian way of speaking is very different to the Nigerian soft syllable way of speaking. So, yes, okay. I'm glad. Welcome to An African's Queen. How has your day begun?
Beautiful over here. And it's a bright day. It's a bit hazy and dusty at this side of the world. Yeah, it's called the Harmattan.
Uh-huh. Yep, I understand. I was there in many years ago, but in December, January, and it was similar.
Okay.
So
yes,
yeah,
it's the Harmattan season till sometime in March or so.
Tell us how it is that you've come to become a digital transformation specialist and all the things that go into your illustrious career. What is your story?
Beautiful. Thank you so much for the honor to be on the African Queen podcast. I hope I got that well.
Yes, this is the thing about the name of this podcast, An African's Queen. And I think it's really important. Yeah, there's that possessive S in there because it's evident that I'm not African. I'm certainly not a queen, but I am the queen to my African husband. So yeah, it's one of those funny little nuances in a name that matters.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. I'm excited. First of all, I have a background in the sciences. I actually no longer look at amoebas, plants at their cellular state and all of that. But all of that beautiful training, created a lot of curiosity in my mind. I was that child that grew up with reading books like Famous Five, Secret Seven. I don't know whether people remember them. I don't know whether whether people remember them. I love a good detective, plot and all of that. So my mind is just wired that way, because also I was that child that grew up reading newspapers. My dad would tell me, summarize what's going on as an 8-year-old on a newspaper, and I have to read, make a summary. If we go to the village in Nigeria, he also tells me, write an essay. What did you experience in the village? So I was that type of child, and all that. So I was always, one that wanted to learn new things. In fact, I still do, over the decades. I find learning my greatest hobby. If you come into my home, you'll see books you'll be like, is this a bookstore? Or because I have such an inquisitive mind. On my system, the same thing, so many digital books, and all of that. So that helps me with what I do currently as a management consultant, because from being able to read, I also start watching for trends, things that are happening currently in the world, and then how we could apply it, to ourselves. So that's where, I gathered a lot of knowledge for digital transformation projects. I actually became certified, I believe, 13 years ago with the PMI, Project Management Institute in the US, and when I did, I was drawn to software projects because that's what I was working in my former organization before I broke out to work with my husband in our organization, Ritetrac Consulting. So because I was more on software projects, I learned a lot about the market and Nigeria, the African landscape, we are not so digital savvy, as at the time, I started working on software. Sometimes when we come into organizations, we have to demo to them what exactly we are coming to do because it looked like an intangible. But then at the end of the day, they would see, beautiful results that will transform the entire organization. One project that really made me know that, we have to digitally transform in Nigeria is an organization called PENCOM in Nigeria. Is a pension commission. So what do? They make sure that all the retirees, they are enrolled into a pension scheme, and they've been doing this manually, and so much happens. You see ghost pensioners, people that never worked as government staff. They would include their names. So much was happening. A lot were not receiving the correct amounts. They were old projects back in the day. This is like 2006, 2004, 5, 6, on that particular project. It really made me see why we should, transform how we work. Because we now moved them, we made databases for them, we re-enrolled them with their correct names, their addresses, did their entire biometrics, and it changed the, how the PENCOM, that government organization, handles pensioners, and pensioners are happier for it today.
I bet, because they're getting paid correctly.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have a similar organizational structure in terms of our superannuation, where part of our salary goes to our superannuation fund, and that's intended for when we retire. So, and that pays us a certain amount at the age of retirement. Yeah. So I think you've actually explained it, but for those who don't know what digital transformation is, help us understand it. What does it mean for an organization to go through a process of digital transformation?
Beautiful. The digital space has blown. Today we have 4G, we have 5G. I heard someone talk about 6G, in certain countries. I do not know whether that is correct, but then there is Internet of Things, augmented reality. So much is happening at breakneck speed, and all of that. So what does digital transformation mean? Changing how we do things, enabling it with digital tools. There is robotics. Today, I think this year, we saw people wake up to Chat GPT from OpenAI, and it's all the rave. People are like, really? It could write my essay? Oh, really? It could
it's going to take my job. It's going to take my job. Oh my God.
Exactly. Okay. So that's digital transformation at its best, being able to, what you used to do manually, it's now enabled by different tools for different use cases, to help you actually do it more in a more automated way and a more structured way, because it cancels out the human errors, that you could see when you do things manually, and then it's more predictable. There is speed behind it. So things that could take you 1 week, you could now, if you digitally transform, you could do it in a faster way. There is an exam in Nigeria. It's my son's turn to write it because he's looking at going into the university. It's called JAM. So JAM is, in fact, every Nigerian knows JAM is a tough exam. In our time, you could see thousands of people, would struggle for the space in the hall to write it because people were so many. We'll struggle for this, we'll struggle for that. And then sometimes your result will take ages to come out. But JAM has also digitally transformed itself. Like my son now, they've given them like over 14 days to write JAM. And now it's CBT, it's a computer-based test. So that means he sits at a desk at the time slot that is convenient, for him within that 14-day window, writes his exam, gets his result, voila. Instead of all of that struggle. Yeah.
In that exam, I mean, how do they prevent or circumvent around the possibility of cheating?
Okay, it's actually done in approved CBT centers. So they pre-approve them. Yeah. So there are checks and balances actually.
So one of the things about, and you alluded to this before when we were talking about GPT, there is, and in my day job, in my work, I consult internally for an organization. Now, my role itself doesn't do this, but the company provides AI and RPL and machine learning. So to get around the acronyms, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, processing, and also machine learning, all of those sorts of things. The fear then is around this technology taking people's jobs. Now, you and I know that's not going to happen, right? Because we understand that the technologies, in fact, aid humans to do the work that humans are best at doing. That complex thinking, the problem solving, the agility, the creativity, the customer service, the sales, et cetera, stuff that bots will never do. So along the same idea, help us understand your experience in Nigeria going through those fears and helping your clients to understand that not only are they going to save money, but they're also not going to have to replace their employees. What are those conversations like?
Beautiful. Very, very succinct question. Okay, so most times you'll find that when you come to pitch an organization, for a digital transformation thing, sometimes people in IT, they're like, are they coming to say, that they are going to stop me from doing my work and things like that when this thing sits? So what we find is that there has to be a lot of change management. In fact, if possible, pilots. So having pilots helps the organization even appreciate, what you're coming to do. This is coming to enhance, not necessarily take over your job, but it's a learning curve, because our culture is, one of a little bit of fear, when such new things are introduced. On the flip side, you will see people kick against the project. In fact, they could hide your files, and mention, I can't find the file. I've searched everywhere. Could you start afresh? So it could be really, really, really tough, really tough, but then because we understand that terrain, going at it bite-sized, managing the change, it helps them accept it, especially if their leadership is open-minded and resilient enough to go through, all of that beautiful learning curve for the organization, then they embrace it. But the ones that are like, they are still in the past, most times the projects fizzle away, honestly. The projects, they are paused. In fact, I remember one where we even bought servers from Oracle. Oracle Corporation in the US. And guess what? Those servers are covered with, cloths to protect them, and they're not being used just because they didn't, adopt the change that came. But I think with I think we have a digital economy, fair to say, over the years, we have the digital economy ministry, or agency, where, they talk to people, they do orientations around, why we must go digital. So a lot is also, it's a journey. It's not like we are there, but then we are really making a lot of progress from where we used to be maybe 2 decades ago or a decade and a half ago. So people are now saying, okay, this is making things easier. In like my son's exams, you're like, oh, that means computers work. So at that level, people begin to accept a little bit, such that when it comes into their organization, they embrace it.
And I think that that's really important, because even in the work that we do, that change management aspect, how you communicate that change and how you take people through that pilot, or the, that minimal viable product aspect of a new project, where you're literally spoon feeding a new idea, so that fear has a chance to be counteracted at every step. And one of the things that I'm sure you guys do this as well, is that you get the champions on board that are already very digitally savvy, but also we seek to find the people that are the most against the project and bring them into the organizational conversations with it, so that we can actually hear those fears and we can work with them and address them immediately. Is this similar to the approach that you take with businesses in Nigeria?
Stakeholder engagement is, in fact, if you want your project to succeed, stakeholder engagement is like the highest thing. Identify every little stakeholder, not just the champions, like you've said, even the person in a filing room, he's also a stakeholder. So you must carry them along, make them know, the benefits. When you sell more of the benefits, this is not coming to take, it's going to make your life simpler, So by the time you're doing this over and over again, then they break down their defenses. But then stakeholder engagement, it has to be ongoing from beginning till the end of the project. That has been, my experience.
I love it. My favorite bit is when the biggest fighters become the biggest fans, and they then become the champions, and they're the ones speaking, the reason back to the other, people who were so afraid, and they're the ones that start to champion it, because that light is turned on, and the possibilities. I think that's a really exciting part of most projects. I love people, right? So it makes sense to me that that's the aspect that, the change management, the communication side of things. So
That's the most important. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I absolutely agree. Now, we know that the stakeholder engagement aspect is really incredibly important, but what do you think the number one thing that companies need to consider before they commence a digital transformation project? What is that thing that you wish all clients had done before they rang you?
Okay. So it all starts from the vision, the organization's vision. It has to align, with having projects. It all starts from your vision and then it trickles down to your goals and then they are enabled by projects, and all of that. So you must have a vision that it's futuristic. Oh, with the way the world is going, can we adjust what we do? Can we pivot? And all of that. I think, what am I saying? COVID taught everyone by force, like we'll say in Nigeria, by fire, by force, that you must digitally transform. Because if not, no work could have been done for
Yeah.
over one full year. And, in fact, some organizations even came back after 18 months. Imagine losing all of that time. You just have to digitally transform. It's not even a question of, is it good, and or should we, look in that direction? Is a must, if you're even going to survive, because people say it's a VUCA world. It's volatile, it's uncertain, there's so much going on,
Yes.
and all that. So first of all, your vision must be one of being able to adapt to the changing times. So if it means rewriting the vision, rewriting the goals, start from there, and then make sure you communicate it from top down so that everybody aligns with that vision. Being able to align with an organization's vision helps you fall into place, with any other thing. So for digital transformation projects, it must start with the vision, your goals. It's not something you will do all at once. The journey of 1,000 miles, it could go with one step. You could say, oh, this is a 5-year roadmap to digitally transform. So in quarter 1 of the first year, this is what we will do. Quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. I don't believe in burning out, because you want to achieve certain projects. It's not sustainable. So if you could spread it, even get help, get consultants in to help you look further. Sometimes people have blind spots. They want to, continue to do things as is. This is how we've been doing it. But then if you get someone to look beyond what you could see, look down the road, break it down, create a roadmap, before you know it, you take it gradually.
Yeah.
Use a lot of collaboration tools, set up your teams, and make sure the team stay accountable to the leadership, and the team communicates. Those are the very important thing. They stay accountable. They don't give up on that journey, because some of these projects could test you. They really, beyond it being sounding fancy, it could really test you. So be in there, have accountability for them, setting the team up, having the vision, having a roadmap, they all help. Those are the initial things, have it, really clear, because if there is no clarity on what we are trying to do, when you jump into it, you may, once you start having issues, conflicts, you may just want to, stop everything. So, but when you do it this way, then it sustains, then you can continue. And over the years, you would start seeing results. That's what I could say.
Yes, and I agree with you. I think reverse engineering the success, starting with that desired outcome, where do you want to be and why? And then working backwards. One of the things that I do with my clients' professional development is that we create the picture of their ideal self. And then we go, okay, well, let's look at what are the gaps here? I never use the word weakness, but I always like to say there is room for improvement. And sure, there are things that, look, we're never going to be good at. And in a company, that's true too. And that's where we need to utilize our network and, as you said, hire outside, get consultants in to do the things that quite frankly, we're never going to be good at doing, because it's just not in our wheelhouse. It's not what we are good at. And I think that that's also important, recognizing those things that you're just never going to be great at, and you shouldn't spend the time and money trying to be good at it, because you'll lose more money than you'll ever gain back. One of the things that I know you to be is really passionate about working to support young female entrepreneurs in their journey to increasing their digital literacy. Why is this so important for you?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So sometimes when I see, because business is not easy, really, when we really look at it, because the statistics are all there, So let me start from the statistics. Many businesses fail by the third year, and most times when I look at it, I'm like, why are they failing? Why this person started passionately, and everything was super excited, put down the funds, hired the, staff, rented an office, bought the equipment, and after 3 years, it starts going down the drain. It could be really stressful. So I was thinking to myself that over time, I remember one of my friends, I didn't know I was coaching her at the moment, my neighbor. In fact, her house was just directly opposite to me. So I didn't know I was coaching her at the time. You will see me come to her house, to.
Is this like a face you, face me situation?
Well, just by the fence. So we just had a fence separating us. So some evenings you see me go into her house, and all of that. And because at that time she was trying to set up a consulting business, and it was tough because she was going the manual way. In fact, she didn't even have online presence, no visibility anywhere. So guess what? Each time I got there, I would ask her, how is the business going? And she would say, it's a struggle. I've sent this proposal here, I sent here, nobody is answering, and I really was touched. She was a young mother at that time, so I started giving her bite-sized advice, actionable steps. First of all, to, improve her brand, and then increase her online visibility, that if she hides under a rock, nobody's going to find you. Even if you were the best thing after, is it sliced bread? Nobody's going to find you, and because of that, she took those baby steps. And today her business is in over 14 countries. In fact, each time she sees me, she's like, this lady here, she's the backbone of everything I ever did, And then I have a sister that is a millennial. She does all of these beautiful fascinators, hats, and she lives in a part of Nigeria where it's not an urban center. It's urban, but then it's not like Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and all of that are like the super cities in Nigeria. And I'm like, you could still work from there, because she's married and she has kids, and she can't really, really start relocating at that point, And I said, create a personal brand, And I passed her through a lot of workflow to make sure that people can access what she does from wherever. And today she has clients in the US, in Dubai, in fact, every day she's talking with DHL to dispatch someone's item. And
maybe I need to.
Are you sure you live in this place?
I've got a wedding coming up, and I need a gele, so maybe I should give her a call.
Really? Yes, I would give you her contact. She's huge on Instagram, So all of that, and seeing their successes and using it in my business as well, I saw that you could have a fighting chance. When you position, when you structure from the get-go, you would start seeing the results, and the results are sustainable, because I always talk about sustainability in everything, because if you burn out and stop it, Nothing is going to change, but if you could continue to improve, you would sustain your business and eventually it becomes profitable. So those were the reasons I started talking to women and girls with businesses. It became I won't say a side hustle because it's a full thing I do. And I have clients now from all over, apart from Nigeria, that I work with. And some I've even worked with them like over time. I remember one lady, she came to me and says, I read chemical engineering, but I don't really want to work in an office. I want to, I have this idea of made in Nigeria chocolates. Guess what? Her chocolates are in stores today because this is like more than 5 years of continuing to work with her. So those things give me a whole lot of pleasure.
I absolutely, totally appreciate that experience of, coaching people to start their first business, and it's kind of interesting that our paths have crossed because that was one of my first coaching businesses, was taking people who are employees and supporting them to transform into self-employed entrepreneurs. And because I had been through that journey and I didn't have anybody to coach or mentor me, and I learned by making an awful lot of mistakes, that having somebody to guide your process who knows, I like to say, I mean, in management consulting, it's easy to understand this to be to be a generalist or to be a specific expert, right? So I'm an excellent generalist because all of my experience is in all aspects of business acumen, which means that I can walk everyone through all of the departments of your new business. And you're absolutely right that a new business will make or break between 3 to 5 years, and it's not just, a lot of people say, well, it's cash flow. Actually, it's not. It's a lot to do with the brand of the entrepreneur that is behind the business. It doesn't matter how many employees you have. I believe if that business isn't represented by a person, it doesn't have to be the CEO, but a person that potential clients can get to know, to build rapport, to have that emotional tie experience with the business, because we have gone beyond now going to a website. We now want to buy from a person in the business. And if you don't have, well, if you don't have that relationship, if you don't have that connection, then businesses will often not understand why they're failing, because humans make choices because of emotional connectivity, not because they have a need. The need is there, so they'll go and search it out. But if they have to choose between your company and this other company that has a great brand presence and a person, guess what? They're going to go and buy from the person, because that person over time has put the collateral online to build trust and loyalty and to demonstrate expertise. And even the smallest business, the mum and pop, like the mum and dad shops, can still do this, and they think that they can't, but they absolutely can, because it's not about what you sell, it's about who you are in talking about your expertise and what you sell. It could be rice and beans in the market, but if you're passionate about that and you talk about where you source it, hey, guess what? I'm going to seek you out next time I go to the market because I already know who you are. And I feel like that is the strongest connection. You don't know me, but I know you. And because I know you, I trust you, as opposed to this other company who has some sort of crap animation 1-minute sales video that says what, but doesn't actually bring me in and help me trust. So anyway, clearly you and I are quite passionate about the same topic, and we could talk underwater about it, but this is really about sharing what you're passionate about. And I want to understand, what are the things that you're doing to support young female entrepreneurs to increase their knowledge? What kind of programs do you have? Do you have training, workshops? What's happening?
Okay, so what I do is I have group trainings, I have workshops, with specific topics that we always, put out there. And even though that is for a paid audience, we also have an NGO. We have Teach for Employability Skills, because we see a lot of people, they don't have the skills that keeps them employable in Nigeria because of our educational system and all of that. So the non-governmental organization is still a baby organization, that we just created for that purpose. So we have programs we've created to talk to people about some of those skills, what you could even use. In fact, we go as far as even, making them understand that even the waste around you, you could upcycle, and get something beautiful out of it that you could put out there. Because a lot of people in Nigeria are either underemployed or unemployed. Underemployed meaning they're not being paid, a livable wage, and all of that. So we want to bridge that gap by upskilling them, so that they can actually really fit in with those programs, that we've been running. Sometimes we even go to churches around us, just to talk to them, people in our communities, because it's really, I believe at the root cause of all the Nigerian stories we hear is that if our youth are well guided, they will turn out to be amazing, human beings that contribute back to the country. So that's why, after so many years of running our business, more than 15 years, a year ago, we created the non-governmental, and, we've been working on it, and it's something that I'm so passionate about, because I can see it, even my children doing something when they grow up with the NGO.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that correct me if I'm mistaken, but the statistics are that like 70% of the population of Nigeria is a youth age, like under 30.
No, I find a lot of places talk about between 50 and 60%.
Okay.
And we are more than 200 million. That's a whole chunk of people, that if we harness them, build their human capacity, they would go places.
Oh, and I absolutely agree. I think that the work with digital literacy will absolutely make Nigeria a technological powerhouse across Africa. And I think the capability is absolutely there, because the skills in coding and programming, to be fair, they're not hard. It's just a different language, a different thing to learn. And there are so many ways to learn now online, and often for free or very low cost, that it wouldn't take much, particularly with the burgeoning, AI, RPA side of things with machine learning. So kudos. I'm really excited to continue to follow the work that you're doing with the foundation. I think it's going to be really, really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, in fact, talking about the future of Nigeria sort of makes me wonder, as we're recording this, you guys are yet to vote for your new president. So in answering this particular question, it's going to come out well after your new president's decided. However, I'm curious to learn from you what your vision for the future Nigeria is.
Beautiful question. Okay, so the future for a new Nigeria that would keep us all inspired, position our kids, for their own life's journey and all of that, is a Nigeria that changes their narrative. We've been known for a lot of things. Let me not say negative things only. Of course, we've been known for really positive things. But the news is agog with a lot of negative things. But then there are beautiful people in Nigeria beautiful souls, resilient people. And I believe we can rewrite our story, so rewriting our story, change how we view things, especially our mentality. I think that's the main thing. If you can change a man's mind, you've changed the man, So I want a Nigeria that, has us all, pumped, just like China, the Asian tigers. We saw them reinvent themselves. We can really, have a uniform, in quotes, voice, to change our narratives, and then orientate everyone, make sure that people, understand even from the cradle that, hey, we have a country, we are proud to be Nigerians, and then we work from day one. It's not really a leadership total, because if we blame the leadership, that is a lot, to put on their plates. It's about all of us, at our workplaces, in our businesses, in our homes, because it's everyone came from somewhere. I believe most people came from somewhere. You didn't fall from a tree, So if from the home, we also do a lot of that, because we see a lot of vices these days. But if we tell ourselves the truth, once we can change, how we are bringing up our children, teach them the right values, have the right values ourselves, you'll see the nation actually change. And then I think one of the things I would love to see change is our reading culture. A lot of times it's all about the entertainment industry. It's booming in Nigeria. Kudos to them. But then we should also look at our human capacity development. Really, when we come from there, over the years, we'll see a reconstructed country.
I think that's a fantastic vision. And I'm inspired because you speak to so many reasons as to why my husband and I have made the decision to relocate. I say back for him, back for us to Nigeria. I've been there once, and I've seen in that time and since in the conversations with family and friends how entrepreneurial and resilient and passionate Nigerians are about their country in a way that I can't help but want to be involved. The things that we're doing from here already over there will establish us as a beginning. But the visions that we have of what businesses we want to do beyond my consulting, and any sort of training or education-based things that I do with my coaching, it's my husband's businesses and the goals for sustainability and environmentally cyclical businesses that take things like, we were both horrified by the amount of rubbish, and yet instead of being disgusted, we were inspired, because we were going like, yeah, but we can bring in new technology that can do something with this and make it a new product, and it will make the country even better, and it will employ and educate and grow the nation. And in many ways, that's just not possible in Australia, because we are so established, and we already have a lot of things that already work, and there's room for improvement in every country. But I think that what's possible in Nigeria is that there is an enormous amount of work to be done, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, all hands on deck. Everybody gets in, everybody gets engaged and involved. And help me understand this, right? One of the fears I'm going to share with you is, well, that common enough that I know and I fear it myself. What's this white girl doing coming into our country telling us what to do? Right? And my husband laughs at me, just as you did. But telling you now, it's a very real fear, because I don't know it all. And yet I have a desire to help Nigerians learn how to fish so that they can support themselves and their community. And if my knowledge and passions, but how do I get over my own fear for that response?
It's going to be, first of all, you will have culture shocks. So let me prepare you for culture shocks. You you would have culture shocks, but then, like every other thing, your vision should drive you. Those, even if you could start with quick wins, it would give you some comfort to keep going, especially because you would have tough times when you really come into our system. There'll be a lot of things, barriers, and all of that. So I'm just preparing your mind, but then if you could swim through that, you would have such fulfillment that money cannot buy, and it will be something your kids, it won't be ephemeral, it won't be on the surface, it will go deep down into your soul. It will be something that when you really look back 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you would even pat yourself. You would show gratitude to yourself. Thank you for taking this journey. That's how I feel about it, what you want to do. So just be brave. Just be brave.
Thank you. I think that is so comforting, because we have beyond what we've just discussed in my last interview, I talked about my legacy and the legacy my husband and I have for our time. And it's big and it's hairy and it's audacious and it's really scary. But we're both so incredibly passionate beyond the sustainability style businesses of what we want to do and our legacy, our 20-year, 30-year legacy that we're building towards right now, that we're slowly starting to seed and plant. Thinking of your vision for the future Nigeria, I'm curious what you think an area of leadership development that you feel that Nigerian entrepreneurs really need to focus on to support the realization of this future Nigeria.
Okay. Change management, being able to be change drivers, not giving up. Since, like I told you earlier, we have a lot of resilient people in Nigeria, so being able to stay the course is a leadership, area, a gap that we need to really bridge. Because if you could stay the course, you would always see the results. But then if you start and stop, you wouldn't see tangible results over time. Outcomes, impacts, they don't happen overnight. So you just stay the course. So that change management part of it is so key. If you want to really achieve bold, hairy, audacious goals, and all of that.
So when you talk about change management, you're not just talking about the theoretical application in an organization. Are you also talking about the mindset, having a growth mindset that enables you to be prepared for, as you talked to before, my own challenges, and mentally being strong to overcome any hurdle?
A lot of that. In fact, a lot of mind management. You need it in Nigeria. You need it like
that's my space,
like the oxygen. So
I tell you what, if Nigeria is anything, it's going to test how much I think I know and how strong I think my mind is when it comes to this kind of thing. So way to put myself in the firing seat.
A lot of that, because people don't know that they should also be able to program their minds. When your mind is programmed, you can go through anything. But then when there is no conditioning, you just want to give up at the slightest issue that you come across. So mind management, change management, really key for leaders in Nigeria. Because our terrain, in fact, we have something we call the Nigerian factor, in quotes, that when things work elsewhere in Nigeria, they don't just work. So we have that as a clause we speak to ourselves. So we need to manage our minds, manage the change, to be able to still achieve our objectives.
This has been such an incredible conversation. I'm so excited by so many things that you've talked to. It's definitely inspiring to hear your passions. As we close up our conversation, I'm kind of curious, do you have any questions for me? Anything that you've kind of wondered about or you'd like to pick my brain about?
Okay. So for leaders, how do you stop procrastinations among, for instance, your team members? This is a random question, where you give them things to do and they always line it up with this excuse, this happened, that happened. What should you do?
So when it comes to task allocation, I want to understand first and foremost, have they been involved in the planning of that task? And how are they motivated? So whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, I want to understand what role they've played in the delegation to or the allocation to of that task. So procrastination is often, there's two ways I look at procrastination. Sometimes it's not actually procrastination. Sometimes it could generally be the need for more thinking time. So if there's a particular task and I use, at the moment in my day job, there's a piece of marketing promotional video that I'm doing the script for. And that is creative, but the demand for me to turn this script around, and I'm all like, nope. And so I have to sit back and go, hang on a second. Firstly, what's my motivation to get this done like yesterday? Just because somebody throws something at me doesn't mean that I'm just immediately going to jump to and be able to perform like a monkey. No, I have to understand what is it that I'm going to get out of doing this project quickly, if at all I could, right? But these creative things, sometimes they simply take time and they need time to ruminate, right? So if it's for me, I like to, or even someone in the team, I need to ask them, how much time do you need? And letting them set the milestone, letting them set the target. If they then don't meet it, well, that's a different conversation. But how in charge are they of the delegation versus allocation? Because delegation is being told what to do. Allocation is being involved in what needs to be done. And you can see that one is empowering and the other is disempowering. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It does. So you mean I should focus on getting them to, buy into the task that they're about to do. They must be motivated. They must know what the task is going to accomplish in alignment with the vision of the organization and why, they should put their best into it. Starting from that angle cuts off procrastination.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the vision of the organization. It can be smaller. So if we come down to a departmental goal or even KPI led in terms of a particular project or a milestone in a project, and helping them understand the decision-making process as to this particular task needs to be done by this particular time for these reasons. Yeah. And also consider that they may not feel like they're up to the task. Sometimes it's confidence, and that they might feel that there's a bit of an inferiority complex happening if they don't necessarily think that they're the right person for the job, because they either don't think they've got the skills or they don't believe in themselves enough to know they can do it. So sometimes it's that. But other times it could just simply be that they genuinely don't know what to do, but they're too afraid to ask for help. So they'll put it off because they don't want to lose face. They don't want to be shamed and they don't want to be judged. So one of the techniques I coach in is to always reserve judgment, always be curious, ask questions, and questions that elicit them to speak honestly, but in a way that you've built that trust over time so that they know that you won't judge them for their answer, and that honesty that they bring you will help you in your mentoring and coaching of how they are as an employee. I think that this ties up a really incredible conversation. Clearly, we can talk a lot more about all sorts of things. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. It's been fantastic. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Okay, final thoughts. Keep staying focused. I'm sure a lot of leaders are listening to this. Like I said, it's a tough terrain to be a leader, but keep staying focused. Also measure what you do so that continuously you improve. Those will be my final words for today.
I absolutely concur. What amazing advice. Thank you once more, and I hope you have an amazing remainder of your day. Take care for now.
Same here. All right, bye.